This RAMA WORKS U80-A keyboard is way too expensive, including the cost of switches and keycaps. I probably spent $700 on this thing, a cost I'm somewhat embarrassed to admit, and despite how great of a keyboard it is, I absolutely do not recommend anyone else spend that much. It's an obscene amount of money for a keyboard, no matter how you look at it. And yet, I ignored my own advice and bought it. If I'm honest, I talked myself into thinking I needed it, and I'll tell you why, and when I do, you can judge whether any of my reasons justify the cost. The first reason is philosophical. Unlike the going wisdom that productivity is unrelated to devices like computers, pens, keyboards, I have found, at least for myself, that it's quite the opposite. Writing is an inherently physical experience. After all, turning thoughts into written words doesn't happen just by thinking. You need to use your hands to hold a pen, your fingers to tap keys, your voice to dictate, or even your eyes to select letters on a screen. This means that whether you like it or not, whatever mechanism you choose as your writing tool is an integral part of the process. And typing on a bad keyboard makes the process unnecessarily difficult and unpleasant. An unpleasant writing experience doesn't lead to a lot of writing, so at a baseline, I'm a big believer in buying a good keyboard. Of course, you don't need to spend hundreds of dollars to do that. There's plenty of good keyboards for way less. And one of my favorites are Keychron's boards. They've got a ton of options, the designs are not too extravagant like some mechanical keyboards, and they're relatively affordable. I wish I could say I bought a Keychron and called it a day, but something was just missing for me, which brings me to the second reason. It's the art of the thing. Industrial design is, of course, subjective. What one may find ugly and barren, another may adore. I think this RAMA WORKS keyboard is extraordinarily pretty. I'll get into how it's built later, but for now, just admire the clean, flawless lines. There's nothing extra on this board, at least not on the outside. No knobs, grooves, or unnecessary edges. Just a block of machined aluminum. I say this as somewhat of a keyboard amateur, at least compared to the real keyboard enthusiasts out there. I don't know all the switch types by heart, I don't frequent the mechanical keyboard subreddit, and I don't actually own that many keyboards, but I do, or did, want an extraordinary board that would last many years and could be updated to meet my changing preferences. More than that, I wanted an object I could admire, something beautiful and functional that I'd look forward to using each day. This leads me to the third reason I bought this keyboard, which is a bit more practical. I wanted to create the best possible typing experience, a completely subjective metric that means something different to each person. So while this RAMA WORKS keyboard may not provide the best typing experience for you, I'm pretty sure it does for me. How did I decide that the U80-A would offer such an experience though, since I never tested the keyboard before I bought it? RAMA WORKS generally only accepts pre-orders for their products, a massive issue which means you quite literally can't test their keyboards before purchasing. But I already knew generally what I wanted, and the RAMA WORKS U80-A fit the bill. First, I knew I wanted a mechanical keyboard with full-depth switches. There's a lot of switch types, from scissor switches commonly found on laptops to the shallow mechanical switches on compact boards, but you can't out-engineer physics, so full-height switches are really the only option if you want to keep that deep key travel with tons of choices when it comes to resistance, sound, and feel. Second, I knew I wanted a spacious board that would sit on a desk, one with separate arrow keys but not a number pad, which I seldom use. As it turns out, this is an 80% board in keyboard lingo. And third, I wanted hot swappable switches. I don't fancy messing with a soldering iron, and being able to easily pop in and out switches is quite appealing. And cherry switches are very common and are interchangeable with Gatoron switches and some other rarer options that also fit the mold. This means that you can pop out switches from your board and completely change how the board feels and sounds. I bought a couple of test boards, which I thought might be useful, but really only gave a vague idea of what it'd feel like to type on a whole board. Typing on a single key with one finger can only tell you so much, though it does help rule out options you obviously don't like. For example, all of the super clicky keys were immediately offensive to me, while others will only buy the louder switches. After much soul searching, I wound up picking the Gateron Silent Black inks. Incidentally, this also means you get to pick out the keycaps, which pop onto the switches. And you might think that these only define how the board looks, but they actually have a surprisingly dramatic impact on how it feels. The shape, texture, and material of the keycaps can completely alter your typing experience. Plastic can be rough and thin, or smooth and thick, and again, each typist is gonna have a preference. Fourth, and finally, I knew from previous experience that I wanted a heavy keyboard. I absolutely do not want my keyboard to move a millimeter while typing. It has to feel like a monolith, like a paperweight, capable of resisting hurricane-strength winds. The Keychron boards didn't cut it for me in this regard. So the RAMA WORKS U80-A keyboard met all my criteria, and in a frankly impulsive moment, I bought it. I felt immediate buyer's remorse, as I do after buying pretty much anything, but I've decided to keep my pre-order. It took 5 months for the keyboard to ship, which felt like a long time, but now appears short by today's standards, and when it finally arrived, I assembled it in a flurry of late-night activity. There were a couple of options I didn't buy, like a silicone insert to make the interior noise quieter and an extra weight, a completely unnecessary option because the keyboard already weighs a ton. Still, even without these extras or switches or keycaps, the keyboard body cost $530. This whopping sum gets you the circuit board into which you snap the hot swappable switches, a brass plate, a silicone mounting layer, the outer shell, and a USB-C cable. The circuit board is quite nice with RAMA branding that you'll only see when you perform your first assembly or change switches. There's RGB lights, a feature I don't care about a ton for desktop keyboards, since my only interest in lights is usually backlighting a mobile keyboard when I don't have enough ambient light. Still, it's nice to have. The interior brass plate mounts to the circuit board and connects to what RAMA WORKS calls a mute silicon layer, which essentially isolates the plate from the metal frame, thereby preventing rattling or sound. Since the metal plate is the surface that holds the switches, it'd probably make a decent amount of noise without the silicone mounting solution. I don't hear any rattling, so I take it that means it's working. And the aluminum frame, which I bought in the yoke colorway, is pretty much flawless. There were no scratches, marks, or blemishes of any kind. It's quite a nice piece of metal if you care about that sort of thing. And wrapping the aluminum frame is a brass weight. It's polished to near mirror-like levels of reflectivity, but you mostly just see it sticking out from the sides in use. Its real purpose, besides looking pretty, is to add weight along the bottom of the board, and it does a wonderful job of that. And the weight, combined with the twin strips of rubber, means this thing isn't budging at all. Really, it might as well be glued to my desk. Altogether, it's actually quite simple, but in a good way. There's very little here that can break, and besides that, it's elegant. I'm a fan of minimalist design, and the U80-A absolutely adheres to minimalist principles. And typing on the keyboard is a joy, and because of its ability to be customized with different switches and keycaps, I'm pretty sure most people would love it as well, no matter their typing preferences. But like I said at the beginning, I don't recommend you purchase this keyboard or really anything else from RAMA WORKS, at least not right now. In September 2022, RAMA wrote a blog post with vague details of an ex-employee who left and is now in a legal battle with the company. RAMA is an Australian company, and I'm not familiar with their legal system, but a quick search on this topic reveals a lot of odd drama. Allegedly, this female ex-employee was romantically involved with the male RAMA company owner, and after some sort of falling out, she left to form a competing company. And if the rumors are to be believed, She was the one with manufacturing connections in China, something I'm actually inclined to believe given RAMA's current track record when it comes to delivering new products, or not delivering new products. For example, in August 2021, I spent an outrageous $241 on keycaps that were once named after this ex-employee, Kate, but are now simply called caps. 2 years later, I still don't have these very expensive keycaps. There have been some updates about quality issues, but no solid information on when the colorway I purchased might ship, if ever. A quick look at comments on RAMA's Instagram confirms that I'm not the only annoyed customer, nor is this the only product that is delayed. Really, until RAMA proves itself capable of shipping its products within, say, 6 months of selling them, I strongly recommend you stay away from the company. Or wait until they have actual items in stock. I totally accept my mistake in ordering the caps, since pre-ordering anything these days is a risky bet, but I advise you to avoid the same headache. There are some other issues with the U80-A as well. For one thing, the 7U spacebar is longer than the much more common 6.25U spacebar. This means it's not at all easy to find spacebars to go with your keycaps. Specialty spacebars are often only manufactured in the smaller size, and even full sets sometimes don't come with the longer bars. This was a particular issue because RAMA sent me a spacebar with their heavy industry keycap set that didn't fit the switches. I contacted their customer support, but the issue was never really resolved. I wound up having to purchase a few other spacebars to find one that was the proper profile, color, and fit. The height of the U80-A might also be an issue for some. I need a wrist rest to type comfortably on the board. A pretty tall wrist rest. I actually had to add some height to make it comfortable for my hands. And this is somewhat common with mechanical boards, though, and it's obviously an easily solvable issue. And lastly, the danger with buying a RAMA board, or really any keyboard, is that you normalize spending that much money on a keyboard. Did you catch earlier when I said I paid RAMA $240 for keycaps? I could buy 1 or even 2 great Keychron keyboards for that price, including switches and keycaps. Being a keyboard enthusiast is a shockingly expensive hobby, and I have to stop myself from perusing pages and pages of keycaps to update my board. And to date, over the course of a few years, I added all this up, I've spent over $1,300 on this keyboard, including the set of keycaps I haven't even received. Do you think it's worth it? Would owning and using such a nice keyboard be worth the money to you? In other articles I've read about people who've bought a RAMA board, the comment sections tend to be pretty divided, with some folks unable to understand why anyone would drop that kind of cash on a keyboard, and others already too lost in the hobby to care. I, for one, have come to terms with my purchase, or so I like to tell myself to cover the guilt. And RAMA undoubtedly continues to sell keyboards. Just the other day, they sent an email about some in-stock keyboards they'd gathered in their warehouse. Some of these cost $1,000 just for the board, yet pretty much every single one was sold out in a matter of hours. Anyway, let me know what you think, and if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. Oh, and one quick note for anyone who's curious why I have like a forest of plants around me. Some of these are normally here, and I'll put in some footage of that. There's about 1 million succulent plants, as my partner has found out. When the leaves fall off of succulent plants, you can actually grow a whole new plant from a single leaf. So that's why we have about 1 million succulent plants in here. And then I'm also babysitting a whole bunch of plants for a friend. So I thought it would be a nice place to film a video. Thanks again for watching.